And here comes Milwaukee. Forbes another three. Oh, no! This is the Random Scrub Heap Podcast.
Welcome to the Random Scrub Heap Podcast. I'm LJ. This is Harry. We're skipping the pleasantries because we're I won't speak for Harry, but watching that game against the Sixers is the most frustrated and done I've been with this team probably since last year's playing game against the Hawks. I'm not drained. I'm not like emotionally drained or defeated. I'm fed up. And I think I speak for a lot of the fan base saying that too. They're continually disinterested. They fell down by 16 points twice in the first half before getting a stranglehold in the second half and then just pissing it away again because Jimmy Butler only gives a fuck 10% of the time in the regular season. And this was supposed to be one of those 10% of the times. And he just couldn't fucking be bothered. He really couldn't. The first half, especially, just disinterested, not Jimmy. I'm speaking as a whole now. The Heat let the Sixers get out to a 10-0 start, lackadaisical on offense, not trying anything smart, continually like just turning the ball over on lazy passes. In the fourth quarter, we're going to be jumping all over the place now, but in the fourth quarter, gotta have it possession. Rozier throws a lazy like handoff pass to Jimmy that gets picked off by Oubre. Oubre pushes Jimmy's ass, punks him into the fucking second row on the dagger layup. It would be a lot more irritating if it wasn't so predictable. But at the same point, watching your team continually come up short in the effort department, some nights if you don't have it, you don't have it. It is what it is. Harry was literally just saying before we started he'd rather lose by 30 than have this kind of effort down the stretch. And I agree, because at least then you have a couple hours to soak, right? I'm not talking about BYU soaking. I'm talking about giving you a second to like kind of understand what's happening. No, it's so abrupt when it happens this way. And when it's in the effort department, it's more frustrating than when it was like last year and it was the talent department when they ran out of gas against the Nuggets. I'm not going to be a Knick fan and blame injuries because that's a pussy thing to do, and that's not the way that the Heat do things. Injuries aren't Tyler Hero's not changing the outcome of this game because Duncan was getting blitzed every single possession by Tyrese Maxey, much like the way most of the NBA really gets blitzed by Tyrese Maxey. Embiid was just settling for jumpers. That old fat man, I'm obviously exaggerating, but that old fat fuck was flopping left and right, couldn't stay on his own 2 feet, so out of shape, and they couldn't take advantage of it. They go up by 8 in the fourth quarter with, I think it was around 6 minutes left, only had 1 field goal for the last 8 minutes of the fourth quarter. They are a fucking college level offense. They are an offense that at the collegiate level would get bounced in the round of 32. That is the offense that we're dealing with this year. It's the offense we dealt with for the regular season last year. It's been that way ever since really the Celtics series of the year they were the 1 seed 2 years ago when they just couldn't score anymore. It was a dogfight to get to 75. They hit 102 with like 8 minutes left and then just couldn't do anything. Jimmy just doesn't get, like, there's been times this year where people have said, the Jimmy run is reaching its end. And I would be like, no. I need to see it to believe it. I'm not going to say it's happening until I see it. I need to see him lay an egg in the playoffs to admit it. I don't know. He has been, I don't want to say very, but he's been bad on defense for a while now. He's not playing passing lanes anymore like he did his first 4 years here. He just doesn't have it. And then the fact that he just doesn't look like he wants to play basketball, it leaves the offense to literally say, Terry Rozier, bail us out. It worked against the Knicks. It's not going to work every single night because Terry Rozier is not that guy. This is the position that they've made for themselves. Of course, it comes on a night where the Pacers lose the night before. This is your opportunity to get a stranglehold on the 6 seed, get out of the play-in, and separate 4 games over the Sixers. 3 in the standings, and then 1 because you would have owned the tiebreaker, so 4 games up on the 8th seed with 6 games to play, all but assuring yourself, all right, well, if you fall in the play-in, at least it's a home game. Fuck no, not anymore. There's a very, very good chance with the schedule the Heat have coming up that they're the 8th seed. They have to go on the road to Philly or Indiana. And then after that, let's just say you win that. Congrats. Then you get whoever the 2 seed is. Cool. If you lose that, now you're on the road, or you would technically, I guess, be having that home game in the winter go home against the 10 or 11, or the 9 and the 10. It's just the fact of prison hoops is so incredibly irritating to watch. Harry, I don't want to take all the talking points away. Just go anywhere you want, because there's a laundry list of things that have been wrong with this team for years that were covered up by Jimmy's greatness, and now he's getting older. He just doesn't look like he wants to play basketball, and even if he did try in this fourth quarter, he couldn't get it going. He couldn't gas it up. And where are you left sitting after this abysmal loss to the Sixers?
Well, I think the Heat has an issue, like a philosophical issue, starting from the top down. Like, to pretend that you can end up anywhere in the Eastern Conference and get out of it because you've done it last season, or you had a nice bubble run when you were the 5th seed in 2020. Past performance doesn't indicate future results. They're not related to each other. They're different teams, different seasons, all that stuff. And I think this is just like kind of happened where people are just expecting Jimmy Butler to turn it on in the postseason because he did it last year. He's had some incredible series. But LJ, that has gotten us nothing. We have nothing to show for any of that. We have some great memories as fans. We have some really cool performances. We might have some of those like where were you moments, which are all cool, like things that should be celebrated as fans. But in terms of the ultimate goal and what they want and what Jimmy has constantly said is the only thing that matters to him, they don't have that. They have not won a championship with Jimmy Butler on the team. So as great as he's been in some of these runs, they have nothing to show for it. It's much more likely, and what's happened every single run, is Jimmy has to overexert himself because of, the lack of help around him. He gets hurt somewhere, in the second or third round, and the Heat stumbled on the stretch. So that's kind of been the last 2 years where they ran into a better, healthier Nuggets team last year in the finals, couldn't really compete. And honestly, the year before just ran into a slightly healthier Celtics team that ended up getting destroyed by the Warriors once the Warriors stopped, playing with their food. So the Heat have nothing to show for this. So when people are talking about, oh, Jimmy's going to turn it on, they have a chance, like, you're expecting the Heat to go from, an okay shooting team to, again, the best. I mean, it's so random. It's not something you can actually bank on or trust. And I said this earlier, LJ, and I'm just getting confused by it because, like, this seems to be a microcosm of the Heat. That last possession for the Heat is such an issue they've had for years, even before Jimmy. That was a shot that Dwayne Wade used to like to take a lot, and supposed to he'd always live with the 3, from a career under 30% three-point shooter. And it's just like, what is the thought process there? If the thought process is, I don't think we have enough to go to overtime, I'm totally okay with that. Like, I'm okay if that is the thought process. I'm really not okay with Jimmy shooting it, and I'm not okay with him shooting it the way it usually ends up, where it's some cockamamie fadeaway three-pointer that has never been close. He had the one game-winning shot this year, but it was a 2-pointer, if I remember correctly. I'm forgetting the team, but
it was against Chicago, yeah.
So it wasn't a 3. And then you have to look at, is Spo drawing up a play and Jimmy's totally ignoring it, and Spo's good with it because it's Jimmy? Because that's a problem too. If you're the coach and you drop a play, the play should be run. Obviously, if it gets, if they kind of read the play or they know what's going on, then you should have other alternatives. But the fact it's just this terrible shot anytime you're trying to tie the game, especially at home, like, that's when you'd want to go to overtime. I can understand if on the road you don't want to play anymore or whatever. It's a microcosm of the issues with this team, whether they shake off Spo when they should be listening to him, Jimmy thinking he's able to do something he statistically has not been that great at, or other guys kind of watching him try to be great and coming up short. I think it's kind of like a good analogy for what the Heat are. And then you can, LJ, you can dive into other stuff like, Jaime's probably been the worst player on the Heat since he came back from injury. Like, I think there's an argument to be made. Maybe he's not necessarily like playing the worst, but he's impacting the game both the least in terms of what they need from him and the most in terms of negativity. Like, he has been
for the minutes that he gets. Yes, he has been by far and away the biggest negative for them.
While we're not looking to like, hey, get rid of this guy. We haven't gone the course of hero where we know he's not going to come up, and deliver when it matters. But we're just like, this is a rookie who got hurt, has hit the wall. We talked about this last pod. This is the most games he'll ever play up to this point in his life. It's the most games he'll ever play. I'm sure he's done. He's toast. And it's showing. And so he doesn't need to be out there. Highsmith has given you better minutes. There are other. Kevin Love was awesome. I know that they probably think he needed to sit for Bam, but I probably would have just let Kevin Love stay out there. I thought he was having a really good game.
You mean in this one?
Yeah.
That's where I would push back on that too, just because Kevin Love was in there while they blew the 8-point lead, and that's kind of why had they like maintained and treaded water enough. Yeah, I think that Love probably would have finished the game. I think you're right there, but because they blew it, that's what made Spo have to bring Bam back in.
Right, but so I will counter back. I just think that I think they set Bam and Terry too long, and so kind of what happens is, and Bam's been a very good fourth quarter scorer. So for him to not play that many minutes and then to only have one shot in the fourth, and it's interesting because other people that probably don't watch the Heat that much, I was seeing some tweets from kind of national people that tuned into the game. They're like, how does Bam Adebayo have one field goal in the fourth quarter? Like, how is that possible? And so that's obviously a Bam issue. That's a coaching issue. That's an aggressiveness issue. And I think you really made a good point in your, when you started the pod, LJ, like, this was a great opportunity for them to kind of secure the 6th seed. We talked earlier on the spaces, like, if they could slot into the 6th seed, yes, things could fall their way. The matchups were better. They could avoid the Celtics till the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, all those things would help them if they wanted to try to make another run. Now it's like they're going to be a play-in team. Their schedule is very tough the rest of the season. Phillies isn't. Indiana's not really that difficult after we play them on Sunday, regardless of what happens there. And this team they don't want it. And it's just like, why? You saw how difficult last season was. The run was incredible, but we've talked about this. Coming from the bottom of the East, because you're playing better teams earlier, that usually means you have to play more games. That increases the likelihood of an injury. That means you're tired going into the series, right? LJ, a big part of last year was like they were up 3 on the Celtics, and we're like, man, if we could just sweep, they'd have so much rest for the Nuggets. They end up blowing 3 games. They have to, they have an unbelievable showing in Game 7 in Boston, but they had to turn right around and beat a Nuggets team that had been sitting at home licking their chops, waiting for them. And this stuff matters in the postseason, like getting rest when you can, healing up, because every game is so much more intense. There are injuries that we never hear about in the postseason because guys are playing hurt because they have to. And to think that you can do it again coming from the bottom of the East, I don't care that we talked about it earlier. The East is not great this year. I think the West is much more competitive. There's much better teams out West. But you cannot continue basically abiding by this flawed theory that has yet to work, right? If the Heat had won championships and we were like, yeah, hey, it's going to be a tough road again, but they've shown they can do it before, we'd be having a completely different conversation. But they haven't shown it before. They've shown that they've always been short, and they've done nothing to really help their stock. And so you're sitting here after a game like this in which we talked about it, one field goal in the last 8 minutes, 3 points over the last 6 minutes. They got outscored 15-3 down the stretch. I mean, just a really bad game at home against a team that you were talking about was struggling, getting Embiid back in, to come back. He's tired. He doesn't have all his stamina. To let fucking Kyle Lowry beat you, that stupid motherfucker.
0-2 against Kyle since they got rid of him now.
Who
Can't beat him.
It just looks like he went over there for a month and decided to work out. He just looks like he's in much better shape, like he cares. And we're just letting that guy celebrate, that he made the right decision by fucking being an asshole and then getting cut, getting all his money, and ultimately being on a team that's going to finish ahead of the Heat in the standings. I don't know if they're going to finish ahead of the Heat in the season, but I'm just saying, you're letting that guy get the last laugh. And I just think we're at this point where it's is this the end of an era here? I don't think you can keep pretending that the regular season doesn't matter at all. Even if you did, kind of looking at March and April and saying, okay, this is kind of where we should turn it on. And they've just been so up and down, right? Even on this homestand, they beat a team by 60, they beat a team by 40, and then they're just tragic losses. I mean, obviously the Knicks game was big the other night, even though they almost blew that game and obviously that's one of their best clutch performances this season down the stretch.
And it took Haywood Highsmith saying, fuck you, I'll do it, and pulling a contested three from a part of the key where he doesn't traditionally shoot his threes anyway, in order for you to swing momentum in that game. If he doesn't hit that shot, I'm not so sure they hold on.
Yeah, and it's just I think that's where we're at, because everyone says, oh, Heat fans are so spoiled. Listen, everyone wants to win. That's the goal. Everyone wants to win a championship. The players want to win a championship. The Heat front office, the ownership, the players. Everyone wants to win. So I tweeted this right after the game, to always take the hardest path possible, because they're not really trying that hard. A path that they haven't been able to, get to the top of the mountaintop and win. It seems like one of those things where you keep making the same mistakes, hoping something will be different. And, that's the definition of insanity. And that's where I am with the Heat. They're doing this insane thing that has never worked. I looked at the stats, a few weeks ago. One team that didn't have a home court series has ever won in NBA Finals. It was the Houston Rockets. They were a 6 seed in 95. That's it. That's the only team to ever do it. A couple 4 seeds have won, and I think a 3 seed has won, and otherwise it's usually the top 2 seeds that end up winning. That's usually how it goes, because they've proven throughout the year that they're one of the better seeds, and there's a reason why they have home court, and that's usually how it goes. So for the Heat to kind of ignore that, and maybe it happened after the season they finished in first, LJ. Maybe they finished in first. Everyone was hurt that year. PJ Tucker had his 3rd injury. Max Strus had a leg injury. Gabe Vincent had a leg injury. Jimmy got hurt. Bam was slow. Maybe they were it's not worth getting the 1 seed if this is the way we end up. But I also think there's a middle ground between getting the 1 seed and having to show up for playing games when we just don't know if they will. And I think they've just kind of screwed themselves again. We've talked about all the lack of moves, and they finally, pulled the trigger on the Rozier trade, which again, I've discussed. Whatever you think about Terry Rozier, I think the trade itself was the right move at the right time. I just don't think they've done enough to surround the team with enough talent to help Jimmy out and not, to help lighten his load and help Bam's load. And I think if they're, from where they're going to have to be, I think if they make it out of the first round, that's going to be their best bet, because I don't know if they're making it much further than that with the way that they play, with the effort they give, and the things they're going to have to do to climb out of this. I don't see it. And every time there's a big game, we talk about it and they come up short. Or in this one, LJ, we talked about it. 10-0 to start the game. It's very tough to come back from that against even a decent team. I think it was 17-2. Then they take the lead in the second. Then they're quickly down by 16. It's this game of runs is fine, but to go multiple stretches without scoring on your home court is really unacceptable. And you called it a college offense. I mean, it might be worse than that. It's really bad hoops for a team that's had success but haven't done it all, and for a coach that we've all agreed is one of the best. Like, to have this on his resume, it sucks for them, and I'm just feeling really down after a game like that.
It's their whole offense is literally Philip Seymour Hoffman in that what do you call it movie? Is that something about Polly? What is that movie where he shoots
Along came Polly.
Long Came Polly? That's what it was. I was thinking about something about Marion and Along Came Polly, and I combined them. But yes, that's basically their offense. Is just him chucking that shit, smacking it off the backboard, because it's so many years in a row now having a bottom tier offense. You would think something would be geared towards changing. That's something you would at least look to, right? To be like, okay, maybe we should fix this. Nope, let's hang our hat on the code of defense, and that doesn't work when you give up multiple 10-0, 16-2 runs. What I want to look at now is where they currently stand and what can you really expect from Jimmy? Because it's April. This is when he's supposed to turn it on, and he's continually not turning it on. Is it because he can't anymore, or is he really disinterested? Because if you look at that last year's playing game against the Hawks, it wasn't there for him. And we thought, well, there's no way you could have been prepared for what he was about to do to that Bucks team. I'm not going to rely on an insane turnaround of history to happen yet again. An incredible miracle run against some great defenses where he just carved them up. You're looking at, let's just say things sit where they're at, and that's the way they finish out. The Heat hold on to 7. They have to play Philly in that first playing game at home. Are you confident? Because I'm not. We just saw what happened on their home floor against Philly. Are you confident for that?
No, not confident. And also, like, if Embiid is healthy enough to play, like, I mean, that guy can go off for 40 whenever he needs, even against the Heat defense that would probably have the right design to slow him down. I mean, that's why the one game thing is not good for this Heat team, because they could have nights where they don't really show up, or Spo's a little off on the rotations, or you get the stars performing, but you get nothing from the role players. Or tonight was more, you had the role players doing okay and the stars not really showing up. And so, I mean, there's really no faith at all. And it's not, I mean, LJ, I'm kind of at the point where, like, if they can't win that game at home, if they do have the home game, or they can't win that one game, I don't really need to go on another, like, how do I say this in a way where I don't sound ridiculous? Like, if you're not going to win the whole championship, playing into June is not great for the following season. Do you know what I mean? Like, the Heat were very unfortunate with the way the bubble run ended, that they were one of those 4 teams that made it, and then the final 2 and had the terrible injuries. One of them that obviously lingered over into the next season, and you could argue that injury may have ultimately ended Goran's career. So that really hurt them the next year, because they had nothing left when the postseason came, and they got swept by Milwaukee in 2021. And again, it was the shortest offseason ever. It's things that can be explained. They've played so much postseason basketball, so much more postseason basketball than anybody else, with an aging star who, while you could argue he might be mentally tough enough to turn it on, and he can push his body to limits that, like, he hasn't shown in the regular season. But 2 things have happened, LJ. He's gotten hurt every year, whether it's been, at the result of someone else, but he's been injured in every single run in some capacity. Even in the bubble, he had that ankle injury in the finals. Again, he had amazing games after that, but he did sprain his ankle in the bubble finals. How much are you expecting from this team? Collectively, they've played a lot of additional games. You got the 82 or the 83 or the 84 if they're unfortunate. So you have what everyone else has played, but then they've played, 20 plus postseason games, every postseason except for that 2021 postseason. And it's just like, man, how do you expect them to keep coming back and performing without changes. And I don't think you can.
That's kind of what I wanted to touch on too, because like it's not realistic to look at that from Jimmy's perspective and think that he's going to give you that same thing that he gave you last year and the year before that, because it was a pretty good postseason run when they were the 1 seed from Jimmy. You look at what he's done, and I was astounded to look at this stat. Since March 20th, Jimmy has had, following the game on March 20th, Jimmy has had 1 20-point game, and that came tonight where he had 20. He's supposed to turn this shit up. And you're sitting here on April 4th saying, wow, it's been over 3 weeks since Jimmy Butler had a 20-point game when the Heat are clawing their way out of poverty yet again. It's difficult. And you look at it, I mean, he took 17 shots, but does that equate to anything? Because down the stretch, he was getting shit ripped out of his hands every time he went to the basket. Man, what was it? Kevin Martin Jr. or whatever was bitching him down low. Kelly Oubre was bitching him down low on both sides of the court, as we already talked about. It's disheartening because at some point you need to look in the mirror and be like, all right, is this it? Is this the wall? Are we hitting it? Because there's not a lot of tread left on them tires. And we're only like lap 250 in the Daytona 500, man. There's a lot of games left to be played here, meaningful playoff games. And is Jimmy going to be able to realistically give you anything there? I don't know. But what I do know is that we have Royal. He just jumped in for his first appearance on the Random Scrub Heat podcast talking about actual basketball, because the last time we had him on, we were talking about the worst movie sequels. Phenomenal episode. You guys should go check that out because it's timeless. It's not like Miami Heat basketball where what we're telling you right now could be absolutely false in 2 days. Who knows? But Royal, how are you doing? Welcome.
I'm losing my fucking mind, LJ.
I was watching the post-game show. I saw.
Yeah, and I just wanted to pop in here really quickly. I'm not going to stay for the whole episode, but like I wanted to pop in here really quickly and just kind of elaborate on some of the things that you're talking about in terms of Jimmy Butler. Like, brother, we talked about it a little bit in the spaces that we had today. Not sure if you guys plugged that already, but if you have an opportunity, make sure you join some of the lunchtime spaces. Join us on Playback where we have these midday conversations about like topics outside of games. But it's just kind of like we were asking whether or not this is Jimmy kind of waiting to wrap himself up, or whether or not he's genuinely lost kind of like a step or gear or something. Like he's lost something that should make us worried about whether or not he'd be able to replicate his past playoff successes. To me, the biggest indicator of that was the fact that the Philadelphia 76ers had the fucking nerve to guard him with Kyle Lowry, and he did not choose to take advantage of that matchup. Like,
that's
I don't
such
think
pussy shit.
I don't think at any point in time we saw Jimmy take on that Kyle Lowry matchup like as a sign of disrespect. How dare you put this little fat fuck on me for multiple possessions and expect for me not to go out here and give you bitches 40? Like that to me is kind of what's lost in this. There are less than 10 games left in this season. We do not have enough time for Jimmy Butler to ramp up to anything. Like, this is the time. We're fighting for playoff positioning. You're essentially playing for a week off right now. And you get that effort. You're relying on Hayward fucking Highsmith and Terry Rozier to carry this team to an actual playoff spot before you decide to show up for work. Look, I don't give a shit who gets mad at me. I don't give a shit who has something to say to me on Twitter. I don't give a fuck about your opinions anyway. Trade this motherfucker. Get Jimmy Butler off of this team. He does not care enough about basketball to be somebody that we're relying on night in and night out to carry this team. Get rid of this nigga and put a team around Bam. No, LJ or Harrison did not say the N-word. That was Royal A. Shepherd. I will take full claim for that. They don't use that type of language on this programming, but I use it all the time. But I'm off of the Jimmy Butler thing. What's up?
We don't use that language at all, just to be clear.
That's the first time that word has ever been uttered on this podcast. George be damned.
Yeah, sorry.
But yes, I'm about to say, y'all got George on here. Who knows what that young man says on a day in and day out basis? But no, like I'm done with the Jimmy Butler thing, and people may laugh at the notion now or kind of ridicule it, saying all the things that he's done for us in the past. What he's done in the past is not an indication of the future of this team with him on it. He's given us some great moments, and thank him for them. But God bless you and motherfuck you, nigga. If you're not playing now, like if you're not playing right now, then I can't rely on you to play at any given moment. So like, I think that's it. And I don't want to let Bam escape slander. I don't know if you guys have given him his shit too. Bam
yeah,
like
we're getting to it.
Yeah, Bam played like a bitch too, and I'll let you segue this into your conversation. But like, Bam needs to do more. I think Spo didn't have his best moments. Waiting to put Bam into the game with like 3 minutes left in the game, like I think that was a mistake. Even though Kevin Love was playing well, like I think it was, even though Bam wasn't playing well, you need to have your best guys on the floor, especially when Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid are going off. So just to kind of wrap all this up, like Miami needs to do better, bro. Like you were in prime position to kind of take. Whenever Miami's in a position to take control of their playoff destiny, they always seem to fold, and that's kind of like a recurring thing with this team, and it's becoming irritating. So that means that you need to change the makeup of this team, and I think that starts with a Jimmy Butler. Like, get rid of him, build what you can around Bam, and then move forward from there. Thank you guys for letting me dominate your podcast for a minute and some change. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's show. I'll be listening to it when it comes out tomorrow.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us for the nice brief period. Harry, now we'll kind of use that as a segue, like you said, over to some Bam talk, because I put it in the chat with you a couple, like right before halftime. I was like, well, we got Pussy Bam tonight. Gonna completely look off any opportunity to score. He did a much better job in the second half. No, honestly, just the third quarter, because like you said, only one field goal attempt in the fourth quarter, even though he only played like 3 minutes anyway. But it was just, you could tell from the first half too, that it was one of those nights where he could get to the rim. Embiid's slow-footed. Like, he's a heavy-footed motherfucker. Bam's whole shtick of why he's had good matchups with Embiid in the past is because he can get by him. He wasn't taking advantage of that tonight. And then even when he was doing that on B-ball Paul Reed, he couldn't finish around the rim to save his life, man. It was brutal. And he was settling so many times for fadeaway 15-foot jump shots. It's exhausting, because you've seen him miss 2 or 3 in a row, and you see that he's settling for it again. And it's like, dude, you've missed the last 3. This one's harder than those. Why do you think this one's going to go in? It's a bad percentage shot. Crotty and E. Reed were saying it on the show too when they were calling the game. I was like, that's a bad shot. That's a low percentage shot. And oh my God. I know we haven't talked about it because we said we were going to talk about Bam, but Royal brought it up too, man. The Kyle Lowry thing, when I was talking about Jimmy, pissed me off so much. That is so unacceptable. You remember last year when Drew Holiday was guarding him, and Drew Holiday's a damn good defender, and he was pointing his face, you can't guard me. Obviously, he's not friends with Drew like he is with Kyle. Kyle's like his daughter's godfather, right? So it's like, I get it. They're friends. You'll be damned if you saw anybody like else on the court play that way. Be like, I'm not going to go after this person, even though it's an advantageous matchup for me and my team, for the outcome of our season and our playoff seeding, because I'm friends with them. No, take advantage of the matchup. He passed out of it so many times. It's just, you can talk on that if you want, but we'll if you don't want to, that's fine. We'll continue to just talk about Bam. But what did you see from Bam tonight? That do you think it's a lingering thing? I know he had a hip issue, but it just seemed to be an off night and just a disinterested night from literally everybody on the team not named Haywood Highsmith and Terry Rozier.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Bam has kind of had this issue with, like, he's had trouble with large centers that he ends up going against. It has not been his. He doesn't usually have his best games when he matches up against a very big guy on the other team. He tends to like pick more on guys that are his size or a bit smaller. So I know he's had good games against Embiid before, but he always seems to be a bit like slow to get into the game. And I think he has this issue where as he's gotten more comfortable with his mid-range, he's become more reliant on that as a shot, even if that's not the best shot for him in a game plan. And I think that rears its head a lot. When you start looking up at the stats and you're seeing Bam's 2 for 9, you're like, how is Bam going to buy a 2 for 9 from the field? how is he 1 for 8 from the field? This is not a guy that should be shooting this low a percentage. And he falls in love with these shots that, as you mentioned, E. Reed, Crowder, you're mentioning, are not good looks within the offense. But again, he doesn't have a lot of guys getting him great looks, so he's creating a lot for himself. And that's not really where his game is at its best. And I just think, like, when they don't come out motivated, and LJ, it was a team-wide thing, like we talked about. 10-0 before you could blink, 17-2 right after that. Like, they just – I don't know why they think they can just, like, wake up and beat teams, but they can't. And the fact they are so cocky and, just, like, condescending about it is obnoxious. So you have Bam kind of struggling. He doesn't deserve blame. I guess my thought with Bam, and when I always go back at people, is, like, Bam is usually giving you whatever he can on the defensive end. So when he struggles offensively, I'm like, all right, hey, would we need more in a series to win? Absolutely. Tonight you probably could. You should have been able to win as the game stood, even with Bam struggling. And I just think it goes back to, like, Jimmy's the table setter, man, and he has not been setting the table a lot this season. You talked about. I think he made the comment ironically, he made the comment about it being that time of year after he got thrown out of the Pelicans game in which they ended up winning without him.
Also the last time we saw Tyler Hero.
Who? And they've really struggled since that game, because that was, they have just not looked the part. You thought maybe they'd come, rounding into form, but it's been either like an injury that knocks them off, or Jimmy just not being aggressive enough. And they don't need Jimmy to take a ton of shots. It's just like they need him to be engaged, and they haven't had that. And for Bam,
especially in crunch time too, when the offense is completely bogged down and you haven't scored in 8 fucking minutes, do something. Drive to the lane and get fouled. He started to do that in the second half, and
yeah,
the game got tight. He said, no.
Yeah, and
He's literally Captain America at the end of Endgame.
Yeah,
I don't think I will.
They've changed the calls a little bit, the way they call him a bit. So I think, like, when he's not getting the call, he gets kind of frustrated. And then he's like, there were plays earlier where he's like arguing with the ref, not getting back on defense. It was just such a weird game because there were so many runs. Coop had mentioned that at Coop NBA that this was probably the best fast break game he's seen from Miami, maybe Jimmy Butler's entire tenure. And it was just like, for all of that, and for you to still have that massive, scoreless stretch in the fourth that ended up basically costing them the game. It's just, I think the way Royal put it is probably accurate, because I was nodding my head a lot when he's talking. If you've seen what Jimmy can do for you, and you applaud him for the amazing moments he's had with the Heat, but it still isn't good enough, and then you're left with this regular season Jimmy who shows up every other game. I have no idea what's going on with him personally, so I don't want to get into, like, mental health is important, and if there are things going on with him or his family or other stuff, like, that's more important than basketball. But I just think, like, if you're going to be out there, the team is really asking you to come out and be the best player, and on nights when you seem disinterested, I don't know how the rest of the team is supposed to rally around and make that happen, right? You're the leader. You're the best player. They're expecting you to try. And for him to have as many nights as he's had where he doesn't look like he wants to be out there, I think it hurts the team. And if they won't, but if they wanted to move on from him, it's okay. Like, he can go play 40 games for a team that's a little bit better established to compete, and, come out for the playoffs and do that. And the Heat can kind of figure out what they want to do about Bam and move into the next era of Heat basketball. Teams are not supposed to play together for that long. Obviously, we all would have liked more years from the big three, but LeBron kind of saw the writing on the wall and didn't think Wade was going to hold up for much longer. So he went, he attached himself to a younger guard in Cleveland with Kyrie. And, I don't know what the future holds for the Heat, and I don't know if Jimmy wants to go anywhere, because I'm sure he likes Miami. He's comfortable here, and he's kind of making a life outside of basketball here. But for the Heat,
yeah, your phone's been cracking up a little bit as it slowly descended.
Oh, but for the Heat themselves, I think they have to think about what makes the most sense for them, and for them to have to ask Jimmy every season to turn it on. And for it to not be enough, and for them to come up short, and for the front office to not make the moves, it might be time to move on for everyone and, try to figure this out moving forward, because what they're doing has not worked. It is not working. Finishing second is not the goal. It's not what they want. No one on that team would lie to you and tell you that's what they're looking for. So for fans to pretend that it's been exactly what they want, they're lying. It's been a successful run. We'll always have memories of some of the games and the postseason runs that they went on because they're ridiculous and crazy. And, the bubble run brought us a lot of joy in a time when there wasn't a lot of joy to go around. And the run last year was so statistically and just like physically improbable that it's still crazy to think that they were able to get to the finals. But it's the bottom line is they haven't accomplished what they set out to do. I don't necessarily think the team has gotten better players around Jimmy in the 5 years he's been here. And it's okay to turn and move on if that's what they think will help the next iteration of the Heat, because, builds aren't supposed to last that long, and this one may have run its course, and I think we're going to find that out in a few weeks.
If it does come out that Jimmy is going through like personal things, I'll obviously retract everything I said. It was just, I think that, like you said, writing on the wall before with the Big Three era, I think you can see it kind of a little bit now. We're definitely closer to the end of Jimmy's time here than we are to the beginning. It's not going to last much longer because, just look at the contract. I don't think you re-sign him to whatever figure he thinks he's worth and whatever he would theoretically deserve for the franchise. I don't foresee that happening. I hope they don't do that, because then you got one foot in the grave for a long time coming. But as for a guy that never won you anything, but I don't know, man. They're in a rough spot because we've had the conversation a million times, and we'll continue to have it until the playoffs start. Is, can you realistically expect him to do uncanny things for you? Probably not. That's not fair. That's what Rozier was supposed to be. That's what Dame was originally supposed to be. They've failed their players, did the front office time and time again. Now it's really boiling to a head in games like tonight against Philly, where you just needed that, man. Like there is no reason, even if they would have won it, there is no reason to come out that flat in a game that can theoretically solidify you in as the 7 seed at worst. There's just no excuse for that.
Right, but LJ, the problem is if they would have won, you would have said, okay, they came out like crap. I
would have clapped and said, nice rebound, but this is a familiar feeling that you just shouldn't have in a huge game to come out so flat.
Yeah, but I guess it changed. Like, it really is a make or miss league. It really is like you feel good after wins and you don't feel feel like crap after losses, because you could have justified like, hey, they played like crap, but they beat the team they needed to beat. They did it at home. They came back twice from 16 down. Like, that's impressive anyway you slice it. And the problem is that the way they lost and the way it happened, you're like, how they just wasted so much time. And now you're looking back and saying, that's what I think Will Mance was saying, man, that's a bad loss. You're going to look back at that loss. And then someone listed like 5 other games where it was like, no, they lost to the Wizards. They lost to the Grizzlies. They lost to the Nets. Like, there's so many games that they should have won and they don't. And we do this every year because they do not take the regular season seriously. They do not put enough, whether it's like effort or care or, coming out with that energy. And here we are every year. It's just, it hasn't been good enough. And the last time we won a championship, it's because we arguably had one of the greatest players of all time on our roster. And, Jimmy's great. Jimmy's had an awesome run, but it's not good enough. And we're going to find out again, it's, the league is getting better. The athleticism, the players are all getting better. There's so many ways. The offensive evolution of basketball is insane. If you go back and watch a game from when Dwayne Wade came into the league and see how cramped the lanes are and how spacing is just not a thing, it's so hard to score in that era of basketball. So you had the giant suits and then no space on the court. That was the early 2000s basketball. But there's so much room. There's so many opportunities to score in the NBA, and the Heat they still struggle, and it's not a recipe for success. And so when they lose, we'll come on here and we'll give our little obituary on the season, but we'll always look back at this run, and there'll be so many what ifs, and it's unfortunate as a fan to think of how differently it could have went if the team had kind of given more focus on the regular season, and if the front office had realized that the team wasn't going to be good enough and had brought in the players that made sense to really make this as successful a run as it could have been.
I think that's well said. But you're going to have to this team is going to have to get punched in the mouth, something fierce in the playoffs for there to actually be real change that comes. And I don't hope they lose. I hope they win. I hope they go on the way and win the championship. But if they do lose, in the event they lose, I want it to be convincing enough so the front office doesn't get the false sense of security that they had from last year's run. It's disappointing. And the fact that we're in the year of 2024 and the 1980s Dean Smith, North Carolina, four-corner offense is more successful at scoring points than the 2024 Miami Heat. It's laughable. It's absolutely laughable. But I mean,
as long as listen, I don't know what's going to happen this year. I obviously hope they win too, and hope I'm wrong, and hope I eat crow. But I'm just not seeing it. But as long as the Heat realize that the hero is done and he's not the scoring insurance that they need, he's off the team, they'll be fine. And they can move forward and they can figure out how to fix this, because the way this team is built, it's not built to score a lot of points. And even in the postseason where scoring is going to be a little bit diminished, they can't keep pretending that Hero offers them something, because he's never on the court. And as long as they move on from him and stop pretending he's like, something that they need, they'll be fine.
And you know what? We'll just say the word insurance. The Heat needs some insurance, and the primary sponsor of the basement has you covered with Simple Health Advisors. Insurance doesn't need to be complicated. You can give them an email, or you can give them a call and tell them that the basement sent you. You can email JPOUGH at simplehealthadvisors.com, or you can give them a ring at 321-345-7738. And now, as we close out the episode, I want to talk about a player that has been had a great resurgence of a year, but it looks like a wall has been hit, much to Harry's chagrin. And that's one Duncan Robinson, who has, in the last 12 quarters of NBA basketball, that's 3 games for you math nuts out there, has 14 points. 14 points in his last 3 games total. I know he's coming back from an injury with a spastic back or whatever you want to call it. That Spo literally just yanked him early in this game. Duncan started and played 20 minutes. That he had the same short leash that Jovic had. That your offense is going to get bogged down a lot when Spo just doesn't give almost half of your starting lineup more than 20 minutes. We already know the talk of how they have, the third most different starting lineups in the entire NBA this season. And then, I mean, most of them don't even stay on the court for like what a usual starter would play. And Duncan's is mainly just because he's been stinky doo-doo poo-poo for 3 games now since he's come back. I hope he feels better. I hope he plays better, because they need his spacing drastically. Because when he's not out there, Terry Rozier is your only 3-point threat. Can Bam hit him? Sure. Can Jimmy hit him? I guess. Defense isn't going to respect it, though. Nor should they. That you saw it mainly when the Heat were up by 6 and 8 in that fourth quarter. They had a chance to put the knockout blow, and they just kept shooting threes in that position where they got like 2 or 3 offensive rebounds. Instead of attacking the basket, they just kept chucking threes. From Caleb Martin, from Kevin Love, from Jimmy Butler. It was just like, enough is enough. Attack the basket. But Duncan mainly, Harry, how do you feel? Are you worried that like his consistent inconsistencies are coming back, or do you think it's mainly kind of injury related?
Well, I would usually give him the benefit of the doubt, but I'm a little nervous because he was starting to show some stuff before he left with the injury. And again, he could have been having maybe he was starting to feel some of the effects of this back injury. Also, I think you said scholastic, and I was like, I did not know his back could read. So I was confused with that earlier. But whatever this arthritic issue is having, like, I'm sure
I said sporadic, by the way, not scholastic.
I'm sure it's an issue, especially if it's kind of like this arthritic condition, which means it's gonna keep like kind of appearing, and it might be great one night, might be not so good the next night. But he was playing so well early in the year, you kind of worry like maybe it was taking too much of a toll on him because he hadn't played that much in years past. And so again, it's kind of like he was the crux of the offense for half the season. And the fact that like now he's coming back, maybe the injury's bothering him, maybe he's tired, maybe he can't take on that type of offensive load. We're just kind of at that point where you start asking these questions, and it's just going to be, we're just going to be asking these questions about players until it's over. Like, hey, do we put too much pressure on Duncan? Is Jimmy going to be able to do it again, even though we don't think he is? Can Bam be aggressive enough offensively to what they need? Do they have, does Haywood Highsmith have a Caleb Martin like run in him because he's, been playing a lot better? Is Kevin Love going to step up as the backup big? But I think all these questions, they're not necessarily going to be answered in a positive manner. And so at some point you look and you say, yeah, Duncan has 14 points over the last 3 games coming back from injury. That's kind of like the balance of the season, right? I didn't expect him to be the most important player on the court for all of it. And now that we're kind of feel like we're hitting the wall, and the wall is the end of the season, it's just, these performances are probably going to be they're going to happen more than not. And the Heat have to find a way to survive them, because if they bring this offense to the postseason, I don't even know if they're getting out of the play in LJ, and that's kind of obviously would be a huge disappointment to end the year like that. But that's what they're facing, that type of, that's a possibility with the way they've been playing, and I don't know where they turn if they're getting bad Duncan, uninterested Jimmy, scared Bam, and whatever other poor performances from the rest of their roster.
I will say this, and as far as the play-in situation for the Heat before we close, we'll know Sunday night, basically, what the trajectory is. We won't know solidified, but we'll have a good understanding, because, I mean, by the time this episode posts, it'll be the day that they play the Rockets. So today they play the Houston Rockets in a game that looked daunting because how red hot the Rockets were. The Rockets have lost like 3 or 4 in a row now. They're they're solidified behind the Golden State Warriors, behind as the 11th. They're probably missing it, so that game doesn't have that same oomph that you would have like been a little bit nervous about because they had something to play for. They kind of don't, because they got what, about 6 games left to the Rockets, 6 or 7, and 4 or 5 games behind Golden State. You can read the writing on the wall there for Houston, so that's not as difficult as a game. But then you have the Pacers Sunday night. If the Heat can beat the Pacers in Indiana, they have a good shot of getting out of the play-in. So it's not, I know we were talking about like the sky's falling, but if they can win that game in Indiana, coming off a win against Houston to get the taste out of their mouth, they control their own destiny still, which is hilarious, but they still do. Do I have faith in that happening in Indiana? Not really, because is Jimmy going to give a shit? Is Bam going to be a pussy? I don't know. Maybe. It's 50-50, honestly. I think that they can easily go into Indiana and beat the Pacers, because Halliburton's been kind of a fraud the second half of the season. People don't talk about that enough, but it's the Heat. They might let him get a quadruple-double. I don't know. That's just kind of the season that it's been for Miami, which was really encapsulated in this game against Philly that we just watched. So, I don't know. Do you think they can get something done before we close?
No. I'm just not. I mean, I would have felt so much better. I told you, LJ, if they pulled off this game, I would have felt so much better going forward because they would have kind of put the 76ers on their rear view. They could have obviously been like, all right, we won. Let's take care of the Rockets. And then Indiana was like basically the big game that probably would have determined seeding because you hope that the last 2 games of the season are basically the Raptors just holding on to, they need to keep that top 6 pick in order to keep their pick. So you're hoping that they're just going to lose and they've lost a bunch in a row. And now it just feels like they kind of have to win out almost. And we know that's not happening. So that's
they got a game against one Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. They are not winning out.
But I just feel like they kind of put themselves in a really bad position. And they did that before this game. I think we got to be honest. Like, if they had been able to escape and, gotten the 6, we would have said, wow, that was the kind of lucky end of the season with everyone else kind of fading down the stretch. But they have the only thing that's been consistent about this team is when they've had an opportunity, they've missed that opportunity. And that's really that we'll look back on the season and that's how we'll think. Like anytime they've had a chance to take 2 steps forward, they've taken 3 steps backwards. And that's been the entire season.
That's a good place to stop it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Spend some time with your random scrubs like me and Harry. I know George usually is in there, and he's the biggest scrub out of all of us. But he's not here tonight. So eat my ass, George. Thank you guys for listening again. We'll check back in probably midweek next week once things seem a little bit more solidified with where the Heat are sitting. You'll see it on Twitter. Follow us both on Twitter at Hot Take Harry and at EL3_JAY for just absolutely phenomenal info on the Miami Heat. We're really going to tell you what's going on there. So take care, everybody. Be good people. We'll talk to you next time.
Need a stop and a rebound. Fournier for 3.
Oh, my.
That was the Random Scrub Heat podcast.